Hello, I'm Don Moores, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. Montgomery County's Minority Health Outreach, which includes outreach to Latino, Asian, African American communities, has combined to present their joint cases to the County Council. Graciela Rivera-Oven is here to explain. The hotline, which includes a suicide line, or suicide prevention line, is one of the oldest programs of the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County. Rachel Larkin, the director of the hotline, will give us all the details. The Montgomery County Crisis Center, located on Picard Drive, deals with any sort of crisis, including mental health, homelessness, or victimization. Noelle Gunzburg, a supervisory therapist at the center, will tell us all about the program. Teenage gangs have been recognized as a problem in Montgomery County for more than 20 years. Victor Del Pino, formerly an attorney in the state's attorney's office of Montgomery County, who was dealing with gangs there, is here to discuss the situation as it now exists. Gracie, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's always great to see you.
Likewise.
And I think of you as the great host, but that's on. So let's talk a little bit about what the situation is. We've got health outreach, specific issues within each of the minority communities, but joining together now.
We did.
What's the situation?
So the Latino Health Initiative, the Asian Health Initiative, and the African American program are under HHS, Health and Human Services.
Right.
And the African American program was the first one to be created many years ago.
Right, we've talked about each of those programs a lot on this program.
And you know, they really much focus on the disparities of health, access to healthcare, and so on. For the last few years, 8 years, we have been getting a lot of cuts during the years, which really has a huge effect on the quality of access in the programs.
Now that's the same. That's the Latin American, as well as the African American and the Asian. All of them have been getting cuts.
All of them have been getting cuts.
But you all been going at it as your own programs, right?
Exactly,
Fighting against one another.
Well, I wouldn't say fighting against one another, but
it's what ends up happening, right, in the budget.
Well, you know, it's an interesting process, and some of us feel that it's a little bit backwards for us. Since we are under HHS, we believe we should be giving recommendations from the funding before the process, and then instead of coming after the process.
Gotcha.
And like you said, we used to fight for the same pie in a sense, right? We used to go after a little sliver, and and then lately that pie kind of went away, and then we just had little crumbs left, and so we decided, and actually Victor is a member of the Latino Health Initiative as well, to join forces this year, and I just want to do a huge shout out to the African American and the Asian leadership of those programs, because it is not easy sometimes, you know,
to work together
or to trust each other, to make sure, you know, nobody has a hidden agenda and so on. And we were each asking, because we felt that either the Latino, the Asian, the African are not, they don't have greater needs, or they're more important than other, like, you know, in a family, all children should be treated equally. So we decided we were all going to ask for $250,000 each, but in a joint
so let's go through this. Looking at the issues, so you're talking about $750,000 for outreach to the three groups, and please join in, you guys, with any questions. What are the continuing disparities that we're trying to address here?
So each minority health initiative has different issues that they deal with, whether it's infant mortality with the African American, for seniors, or suicide issues with the Asian, or with us it could be asthma programs, obesity prevention, and so on. So we focus a lot on access and empowering the communities. There has to be a cultural component when you do outreach and health disparities with communities, because there's a lot of issues that come along when with, you know, let's take mental health, you know, in the minority communities, reaching out for help or going to see a counselor or a psychiatrist is not.
The stigma is even greater in many countries from around the world.
So you need groups, right, who are able to reach out to those communities and able to identify with them culturally in a very competent way, to be able then to provide those services. So we feel that, each minority plays an important role.
Okay.
And in the past, with the ACA implementation with the Obamacare, we saw that even the state of Maryland was having issues getting people to sign up and join. And they actually asked us for help in being able to reach out to this community.
And similar, right, Grace, when the issues arise, in other words, like the children fleeing violence and things of that nature, there were, I think a lot of the community leaders sort of come to LHI or different initiatives.
Right.
Latino Health Initiative, LHI.
Exactly.
Right, Latino Health Initiative, LHI, right. So there are things that we don't necessarily always encounter at the beginning of the year.
Right.
But obviously in the middle of the year when
we face
budget issues have
challenges.
already been handed out, we're
Exactly.
facing significant challenges.
Yeah.
And I know the Asian American Initiative as well very largely felt that they were almost at the edge of extinction because they had so many cuts.
Right.
So I think the huge issue with some of these conversations that we had with council members, and they stepped up, was that they recognized that we all recognized the importance of each community. And I
Right.
think there was a genuine feeling of community that we're talking about the entire
Chris, let me
community.
ask you this question and follow up. And you guys, please ask questions. We only have a minute left here. Why would the county executive, why would the county not want to fully fund? Because we're talking about prevention by and large.
Exactly.
So what's going on?
That
We're
was
in a
our
diverse
question.
place.
that was what was,
Got about 45 seconds left.
that was our question. And I think, you are funding so many things. You have so many nonprofits doing great things, and you think everybody's taking care of everything. But when you have these programs under HHS, you are a great tool for that. So I think I want to thank the HHS committee and their leadership, and the rest of the council members from Nancy Navarro, Mark Eldridge, and all those guys, for their support. But I think it was also a very educational process, not as much for us, but as for them, and for the county to see the importance that the programs play.
We look forward to hearing about how all this joint effort works, and kumbaya in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you back.
Thank you very much.
So Mental Health Association and the hotline, tell us about.
Well, I really want to bring to the forefront that the spring is a high risk time for suicide. Most people think it's around Christmas time, but it's actually the springtime. And we just want to let people know that there's so many resources in the community. We have a hotline, we do chat, we do text, we work closely with the Crisis Center and community health initiatives to get the word out that if you're feeling down, if you need help, if you need somebody to listen, there's so many places that they can go.
But I think of SAD, the seasonally adjusted depression, whatever disorder.
Seasonal
affective
affective disorder.
Okay, I'm sorry. That usually seems to be wintertime
Yes.
coming in. So why springtime? The days are getting brighter. Claritin commercials. The world is bright. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of theories. First of all, think about what happens in the spring. Graduation, and if you're not graduating, if people are getting married, having kids, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of
Prom.
pressure. Prom, exactly. There's so much going on. And also in the winter, a lot of times you expect to be depressed. A lot of times in the winter, you don't have any energy, and it takes energy to sort of carry out a suicidal act.
Before we go on, I know people have all got questions and comments they want to make to you. There's a phone number you came with. What is that phone number?
It's 301-738-2255. That is the hotline. And also Monday through Thursday, 4 to 9, we also do texting. And text and chat are a new way for people to reach out, and it's often much more comfortable. We had an Asian young woman who was from a family where reaching out for mental health was not acceptable. And she couldn't tell her parents that she was going to call a hotline or go see a therapist. And so we chatted with her over text, and she was of the age where she could walk into the crisis center by herself and get help. And that's one of the things that we did. That she could go and get help. Because she was self-harming and she was suicidal, and so it's we're so glad that she was able to reach out. We want more people to do that.
With all the focus that there is on mental health, not just locally but nationwide, and it's like the sexy topic, right? Mental health this and mental health that, and we need the support and we need more therapists and so on. But with that, I feel like you need also the monetary support to be able to have this hotline, or maybe to be able to make it bilingual or multilingual, and to be able to focus on certain groups and age groups, like with the youth and so on, and then the elderly, they have their own issues.
Okay.
So my question to you is, do you see that support, that excitement monetarily? Because at the end of the day, right, that's what you need to be able to provide these services.
Well, everybody when they hear about the text line says, "Oh, that's a great idea." Of course. who talks to somebody on the phone anymore? Like, everybody eye contact is over text. But it's hard to find funding for. It does take technology, takes a great deal of training. We have, really experienced staff and volunteers, and it is cost heavy, but it is so important. I mean, to have the crisis services that we have in the county, it's just, we need that. We need to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. And that's why all the programs here are so vitally important.
Teens, because we really want to be focusing on
Yeah.
teens. We've got teens coming up. All right. What are some of them? We talked a little bit about graduation and prom and dating and college, whatever. What are some of the particular issues here in Montgomery County, or the DC metropolitan area, that you see with teens across the various ethnic groups?
Well, the CDC just came out with data that the suicide rate across the board has been going through the roof. But in 10 to 14-year-old girls, it has tripled in the past few decades. There's so much pressure to be perfect at all times. And it's, you have to look right, you have to get perfect grades, you have to be, just all around perfect. And there's so much pressure. We see self-harm, we see immigration and acculturation issues, we see, like if somebody gets a B+ on a test, as an adult, that might not be the end of the world, but to a young person, who doesn't have good coping skills, it can be. And so really,
what's the source of this pressure? Because it seems to me that we've all had parents through generations coming in and saying, look, we want you to do your best. But this whole world of social media, and is that the source of much of the angst for these kids?
Well, I don't want to date myself, but back in the day when I came home from school, that was it. I was at home. Now kids are connected 24/7. There's constant conversations going on. There's you're constantly connected to everybody, and so it's sort of relentless in a way. You never get a break, and conversations are going on even when you're sleeping, and you're missing out, and you don't get enough rest. So it's difficult. It's difficult for adults too. There's a lot of pressure to, have as many connections or have all the Instagram likes, or so everybody really feels social media is tough. And we actually have a guide, if anybody wants it, is how to deal with somebody if you have a friend or family member on social media who is suicidal.
We've only got about 15 seconds left. Any final thoughts, final words you want to share with us?
Reach out. There's help available. We're willing to listen. Please, just take a moment, talk to somebody. It'll make a big difference.
Or text somebody, whatever the
text.
case may be.
However you feel most comfortable reaching out, we're there for you.
All right. Well, Rachel, we're really grateful that you're here for us as well. We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. Noelle, welcome. I think this is your first time on the show.
It is. Thank you.
Crisis Center.
Crisis Center.
I mean, and what's going on with the county government, what you do. I want to hear all about what you do.
So the Crisis Center, that would take a very long time to talk about everything that the Crisis Center does. We are essentially a jack of all trades, both for mental health and other forms of crisis that people may encounter in the community. We cover mental health crises, suicidality, victimization, homelessness services. We kind of run the gamut on being able to assist in really any situation.
So people will contact you, and then your job then is to reach out to who might be the appropriate folks within the county government as a one entry point.
No,
or?
well, we are at the front end. We are providing the service. So I have a staff of mental health clinicians. So we can respond out on a mobile crisis team. We can have people come into the office to be seen and get a mental health assessment. We can do placements for the homeless shelters. And so we're kind of that entry point.
And Noelle, people probably don't realize that you don't have to have insurance to go to the Crisis Center, and it's free. You can just walk in any time of day.
As of this moment, all of the services at the Crisis Center are free, and we are not currently billing insurance, though there is discussion that may change in the future. I know we've talked a lot on the show about budget.
So if you have insurance, they'll bill it. But if you don't have insurance, our concern is that you're getting the help, the emergency help.
There is no bill at all.
Right.
Insured or uninsured, no one is getting a bill
now,
at all. We are charging absolutely nothing for our front end services as of this moment.
Well, let's continue real quick. Before we do that, there's a phone number if somebody wants to contact you guys.
So our crisis line number is 240-777-4000, and that is answered by mental health professionals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of what the crisis is.
And if it's a true emergency, you want them to do 911.
Yeah, if there's a medical emergency,
Right.
if someone is being violent, if someone is currently in the act of harming themselves, you're
Right.
probably going to want 911 to get an ambulance and the police response.
Now, we've been talking again about teenagers
Yes.
in this county. Are there some specific things that you're doing that stand out in addressing the needs
Yeah,
of teenagers?
as far as teenagers at the Crisis Center, we have a cooperative relationship with Montgomery County Public Schools. And Montgomery County Public Schools send us over 1,000 children every year that are experiencing various forms of mental health crises, a lot of suicidality and a lot of self-harm, unfortunately, we deal with on a daily basis.
And I heard one of the biggest rises was in elementary school age kids.
It was. We had a huge jump in elementary age kids coming to the Crisis Center over last year and again at the beginning part of this year.
What do you attribute that to? Is it the bullying? Is it the fact that they are more connected to, to different electronics? I mean, I know like in my house, I have a rule. In order to have Facebook, my son had to turn 14. Now he's almost going to be 15 and he still hasn't
Yes.
asked.
And-
But I'm just wondering what are you guys seeing as the causes of
With
that?
the younger kids, I think the most typical thing we're seeing is the either splitting of parents or we've had a lot of actual unaccompanied minors come over where they're now in a new situation. They're having difficulty
of trauma,
transitioning,
yeah.
right, from the move and from living now with a different relative or living with their mom who they haven't seen in 10 years and they're trying to reform that relationship. It causes a lot of difficulty and a lot of mental health symptoms to emerge because it's a new situation and they don't quite know how to handle it. They don't have the coping skills.
How difficult has that been dealing with the minors that were unaccompanied? I mean, obviously that trauma-wise and then language-wise and cultural-wise,
Yeah.
that has to be a huge issue for
It
you all.
creates a challenge on numerous fronts. It creates a challenge, especially we're talking about elementary school kids,
Right.
legally. Who is the guardian? In a lot of cases, there is no guardian. So who's consenting to treatment? Because you have to be 16 to consent to your own
Right.
mental health
And you have
treatment.
the whole HIPAA.
So who are we
situation and-
contacting? Who
right.
is the pseudo parent? Is there a pseudo parent? Who's taking responsibility for the child's mental health?
How do you resolve that?
There's a lot of ways we've resolved it. Sometimes they have immigration attorneys, and we contact them to kind of see where are we in the process, who can consent to what. We've had them come in with letters from the parents. Some parents have sent over letters that say, such and such is going to be the caregiver for my child. Depending on kind of the extent of the emergency, we'll go with that. Because it's more important for us to be able to assess these kids and make sure they're getting the services they need.
We've got about a minute left. Now, as I understand, you're an attorney as well.
Yes.
So this doesn't sound like a normal kind of practice. What is it about your background in the law do you think that helps you in this job?
So I think legally it helps a lot with the HIPAA stuff. I get roped into a lot of kind of what are we going to do about this? What records are we going to
Right.
release kind of thing, and a lot of subpoenas and preparing my staff members for court. I was not an immigration attorney, so that doesn't help at all. But it does help me know who to contact. So to know who could help with a U visa for a domestic violence victim and be able to get them referred quickly.
Good.
What agencies will help get these unaccompanied minor status in the
great.
country
Okay.
to at least make the referral.
Okay, perfect. Any final word? We've got 5 seconds.
Kind of echoing what Rachel said, if you need help, please come in. You can come into the Crisis Center. You can call and we can send a mobile crisis team out. And we're always happy to respond, whatever the need may be.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hope you'll come back again.
I will.
And somebody who's been here before, Victor, welcome back.
Thank you.
So how many years ago was it when you took off your state's attorney hat?
About 6 years ago.
God, it seems like yesterday.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes it does.
You haven't changed a bit.
Oh, a little bit more gray hair.
No,
I
not
think,
much,
yeah.
not much. Good counsel Falcon
That's right.
wearing that, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about going back with the gang. So we've been talking a little bit about a lot about teenagers, and this is one of the pressures. You dealt with gangs in the state's attorney's office.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the current situation?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's something that is still very much there, and I think that's sort of the concern is that as a community, these are things, gangs, specifically with young kids and recruiting kids, these are things that unfortunately we just can't get rid of, and we can't get rid of because there's a unit, or we can't get rid of just because certain people say it's important. I think we pretty much have to acknowledge that that we have to be very proactive about the gang issue with young kids. I remember when I was a prosecutor, we did a lot of proactive things in schools, and I know we got a lot of pushback that we were talking to kids that were too young sometimes. But for me, that was always vitally important, because I often found that if we were waiting until the kids were 16 or 17, it was too late.
And we're also talking about something real quick, that's a community, that's around the Beltway and elsewhere, right? It's not just within our county.
Absolutely. I think that, I was always very careful when I was the head of the gang unit, and I speak Spanish, I'm Latino, but it was very important to acknowledge that, it's not a Latino thing. We do have some gangs in this community that do have direct ties to Central America and things of that nature, but there are a lot of gangs that were just born and bred in Montgomery County or in Maryland and Virginia. So these are things that we sort of deal with all the time that have been here for some time.
Do you see any connection, because we kind of ponder this from time to time, between kind of the unaccompanied youth coming over and feeling like they don't really have a sense of belonging and using that?
Yeah. I think that in large part, I think that's sort of gang 101. I think that gangs they oftentimes go after kids that need that attention, whether it's family or lack of family. And we deal with at the Latino Health Initiative and different also what I currently do as an attorney, we deal with a lot of issues, and I think sometimes it's impossible to sort of understand being a teenager and seeing the trauma that they've seen in their countries, coming unaccompanied and sort of wanting some sort of connection.
Isn't the great irony in this is that their parents are sending them here to escape recruitment for gangs and only to be vulnerable.
See that all the time.
It's
see that all the time, where they're being sent here specifically because of the gang issues in Central America.
And having to make it through Mexico and all of the other depredations
Can't
in Guatemala,
imagine.
it's just horrible.
But let's not also forget that we have seen this before. We have seen this in the early 90s.
Oh, sure.
Okay, and you will
later.
hope. Well, you will hope that we had learned from our lack of response in the 90s. As someone who ran a program for kids in gangs, and who got a lot of pushback from politicians and so on, saying we don't want to say that we have an issue in gangs. It's not. I'm seeing the same
That's terrible.
pattern right now.
Okay.
And so I think that we need our leadership to step up to the plate.
Do you
and
see the same? Are you seeing this a little bit?
I think I do. I think it's. I think there's sort of an attempt to very quickly make it seem like the issues are resolved. We fixed it, and I think that that's probably not the direction you want to go in. I don't think there's anything wrong with having units or departments or organizations that deal specifically with gangs. But what I think is important for elected officials and policymakers is to listen to the people that are on the ground. I mean, for instance, Identity, and that organization is a nonprofit that when I was a prosecutor, I dealt with all the time. We deal with, for different aspects, we deal with them often. I mean, Street Outreach Network, Lou Cardona, these are people that you need to, when there's a question, policymakers and elected officials don't go Google gang issues and try to determine what the best aspects of dealing with the gang.
Or even before there's a recognition of an issue, of incorporating.
Oh, right.
And
it's important that those people that work on this stuff every day are consulted.
And it's also important to give the tools to people like at the Crisis Center, who do the prevention, to give them the funding and to give them the staff and to give them the support that they need in order to be
some
able.
of the people watching this show right now would probably not link gang issue with with the crisis center, but I mean it is
Or with the mental health
with the mental,
association.
these are all things that they need to be unified and understand that everyone's just trying to work on the same thing here.
We've got a little bit over 30 seconds left. What is your personal involvement still? I mean, you were at the state's attorney's office, obviously you were living all this. How are you engaged? Because this might be an example for others who are in private world to engage.
I mean, obviously I'm in private practice now, and most of my practice is criminal defense. So it's one of those types of things where I see things every day. I try to work with a number of different organizations, same ones that I worked with when I was a prosecutor, to try to be proactive and sort of acknowledge that it's an issue that hasn't gone away.
And keep working on it.
Yeah, thanks.
And maybe we'll get to it, hopefully. You've done such a great job highlighting these issues. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And I want to thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us right here for this edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I look forward to seeing you next week at this very same time for our next episode. I'm Don Mooers. Over and out.